Hello, I'm State Representative Ross Wilburn, and I'm running for a third term in the legislature, this time under House District 50 due to redistricting. But I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for giving me and us this opportunity to speak to you. And most importantly, I want to thank you for watching these videos and trying to educate yourself on the issues as well as about us. A few things about me. This is my third term that I'm running for, and proud to live here in Ames and Story County. I wasn't born here, but the folks here in Story County have really embraced me and given me the opportunity to put your voice and your vote into action at the State House, and I'd like the honor and privilege to do that again. I've served also at the local level. I'm a former mayor and a 12-year city council member. I've used that experience in addition to my work in a school district and my work as a nonprofit, former nonprofit executive director, to address both the physical needs of our communities, to address the social emotional needs of our communities. And that's important work to do. I know that people can be tired of politics and exhausted with the way things are going, and nationally seeing some things filter down here to Iowa in terms of people being scared, afraid to put out a yard sign or to talk with family and friends about the issues that are affecting us. I get it, and that's why I'm starting with you, and my fellow Democrats are starting with where people are at. And what we've heard is people want to make sure that that costs are low, that we can try and find ways to lift wages, that we are using our public dollars for public education, as well as supporting our Regents institutions. And then, with the Roe versus Wade decision, concerns that well over 60% of Iowans are having with access to reproductive health care is just three of the broader things. But I do want to make sure that you all know I will continue to connect with our mayor, to connect with our county supervisors, our school board. I still need to meet the new superintendent. I'll make sure I get out to do that. But also, our university, to make sure that we've got economic opportunity, we've got fiscal responsibility, but we're making investments in you and making investments of us. Again, I'm Ross Wilburn. Go to rosswilburn.org. You can find out a little bit more about my positions, and let's get this done. Let's do this and continue to build a strong Ames. Thank you. Right, and housing has been a problem not just in Ames, but out in the rural parts of Story and Boone County, both in terms of the cost to construct housing and affordable housing. I mean, it costs just as much in a rural area as it does in town for supplies, that type of thing. And then there's an increasing number of folks who are paying more than 30% of their income for housing. In fact, I think in Iowa, I think, if I remember right, almost a quarter of Iowans are paying 30% or more of their income for housing. So we can do things like create a state affordable housing tax credit program. We can increase the first-time home buyer tax credit for a single person to $5,000, and for joint filers to $10,000. For renters who have an even higher burden on them and their income and how much they pay. There's some things like folks who are living in manufactured housing. We make sure there's protections for renters with those out-of-state owners that are really jacking up the prices and the rates. So that's just a combination of things, but overall I think it's important that we in the legislature and the governor try and do what we can to both keep costs low for individuals and especially small businesses, but as well as looking for ways to elevate income. I mean, the minimum wage in all of the surrounding states to Iowa are greater than ours. Right, the importance of having broadband access and affordability as well has just been magnified because of the coronavirus pandemic. And fortunately, one of the responses by the Biden-Harris administration is to provide that funding to get towards broadband, whether it's the CARES Act or the American Recovery Act. Those are federal dollars that Iowa has taken advantage of. Our access to broadband has increased because of that, but there's certainly a lot more that we can do. We can make sure that we are going after all the federal funding that is available. The governor has said, that this type of support shouldn't be given from federal. At the same time, tapped into it and used it, and we need to get through all of that. And those are our federal tax dollars, and we need to utilize what's available for Iowa to lift the ability of Iowans, both education, the telemedicine, whether you're in an urban or a rural area, just to be able to work, learn, and in some cases just connect with individuals. So, those are some of the things that we can do if we're going to provide some type of tax incentive for business, larger business, even smaller business. Look for ways to both help decrease that burden, increase the access, but for those providers, try and make sure that we are broadening the number of options for folks in terms of access. It's increased because of that incentive, but there's certainly more that we as a state can do to try and incentivize. If we're going to give the companies that are providing that broadband access a tax credit, then we can require that they expand that coverage. And so those are some of the things I think we will need to do. It's just we've evolved to that point to keep Iowans connected to opportunity. For those that qualify for the support from the state, we can certainly expand the income level of Iowans so that they can afford that, especially those, if you've got, as you mentioned, folks that are either moving here or folks who live here and are first-time parents. I mean, all the planning you do, once they get to that child care age, then that's when the costs really sink in. And more and more people are paying an even greater, I mentioned the 30% for housing, even greater percent for that child care. It's important that it's affordable, that it's accessible. And so we can do that. We can try and incentivize, again, if we're going to give out a business support, some type of tax credit, find out if we can give a greater tax credit to those who are trying to help make child care available to their employees. Unfortunately, in this, I talked about wages. It's important that you get it's not just babysitting, it's learning and early learning. It's the foundation for the next generation of Iowans. And so we need to make sure that the child care providers have the support that they can do to make a living in that field. And unfortunately, there are some things done with the governor's support and signed that can create some barriers and make some things difficult and in some cases not safe. The governor signed a bill to decrease the age of someone that can be a provider without supervision down to 16. And that could create some situations where a young person may not be prepared, especially if it's a child who has some special medical needs. I think the other thing that unfortunately was done was to for those that are receiving the support assistance for child care, the governor's expanded the number of children per staff. And so, anyone who does child care, and any of us who have children, mine was a long time ago that they were younger, but when you increase the number of children at a certain age that you have to supervise, and and you're not making a very good wage, it can increase the stress and increase burnout. So, those are the combination of things that we can do. We can also continue to look at ways to have public-private partnerships so that we can have that child care availability and affordability. Part of coming to Iowa, as well as being willing to retain people here in Iowa, is it's the job and a way to make a living, but it's those quality of life, and certainly child care and being able to make sure that our children are safe, that they are learning and ready to learn when they hit school. That's an investment that we can make, especially with $1 billion surplus. One, we need to acknowledge that the dollars are there. We can't just point a finger at the federal government and make the broad claim of being this some type of socialist program. No, we're looking at making investments in Iowa. We just talked about housing. We just talked about child care, broadband, 3 critical issues, ways that we can keep costs low for individuals and smaller businesses, because that's really the driving engine behind Iowa. Just the tremendous volume of small business employers that we have. We need to make sure that we are getting support for education in our K-12 dollars, that we are using those public dollars towards public education. The cost of living increases over the years. $20 doesn't spend the same way it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so being able to invest in our K-12, as well as opportunities for using that investment and those funds to support our Regents institutions. Those are some of the priorities that I think we need to make. I and my Democratic colleagues have really looked at starting where people are at, and so we really did a deep dive into what Iowans, both here in Story County and across the state, on what they are looking for from government. They want to keep costs as low as possible and look for ways to increase wages. They want to make sure that public dollars are going towards public education. And some of those social issues that come across us nationally do affect us locally. And so the decision with Roe versus Wade, in terms of younger people or people willing to come to our state or remain in our state, that reproductive health care is, and access to that type of care is critical for well over 60% of Iowans. So, those will be the 3 broader things, but encapsulated within each of those, there's a certain amount of local control. We've got school board members, we've got city council members, we've got county supervisors that need to be free to implement ordinances and laws that support and lift opportunities for Ames and Story County residents. And unfortunately, the Republican-led legislature and governor have taken away some of those local control. I try and spend as much time as I can reaching out to our mayor, our county supervisors, and university folks to find out whether there's a bill coming across the legislature that's going to have an opportunity for us and for them to exercise what Ames and Story County residents are telling them, or if it's something that's going to be a barrier. And I hope to continue that connection with the local electeds to be able to support all of us here in Ames and Story County.